Hello and welcome to Please Me. Last week, Eve interviewed Debbie Spector-Wiseman, a dream expert who gave us tips on how to bring those spicy dreams to a satisfying conclusion, if you know what I mean. She talked about lucid dreams and dream reprogramming, which allows us to use our dreams as creative outlets as well as self-improvement tools. Be sure to listen. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Eve is a licensed sexual health physical therapist on a mission to destigmatize conversations about sex. Please sit back and surrender to the pleasure of Please Me. Who's looking for a sexy date? STC.com is the premier ethically non-monogamous dating site that also houses a wealth of information regarding sexuality and sexual health. Join the Please Me Health Collective on STC.com and listen to Eve's free live webinars. Use code 37340 for a free trial membership. Maybe you are in the market for some sexy toys to add some spice to the bedroom. Check out the Organic Lovin' link for the best online store for sex toys, lubes, and more.
Everything from pet play to kink to communication to making sure your partners understand and feel like they can talk to you, to some really good analogies of like how play can be an art form. And I will just note for the ladies and the gentlemen and the theys and the thems and the all of the above and everything in between, I have a very strong feeling it's going to be quite delicious.
Are you suffering from erectile dysfunction in silence? Are you embarrassed by premature ejaculation? Is it hard to get an erection that is long enough for penetration or that lasts long enough to satisfy your partner and yourself? Just know that you are not alone and that 20% of men suffer from erectile dysfunction in their 20s, and it goes up 10% per decade. So 50% of men in their 50s will have some form of erectile dysfunction. My name is Eve Hall, a licensed physical therapist who treats conditions such as erectile dysfunction and other sexual health conditions. I'm here to tell you that there is a solution to erectile dysfunction, and I offer the gold standard in my practice called Inspire Health Physical Therapy and Wellness. I have a full protocol to get your sexy back, so know that I am here to help. Just know that there is no shame in having any sexual health condition, including erectile dysfunction. If that is you, be sure to reach me on SDC.com and leave me a message there, or reach me on pleaseme.online to listen to my podcasts, or to leave me a message and book an appointment today. Hello, and welcome to Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex by turning the sheets into our classroom. I am so excited to be welcoming Jake Didinsky to our podcast today, and I am so excited to talk to him. He is a professional DJ, a producer, an event promoter, a nonprofit CEO. He also is autistic or on the spectrum, and he identifies as non-binary, pansexual, and demisexual. As part of the neurodivergent population, being autistic, I think that this is such an interesting topic to cover with you because you are the first neurodivergent person that I've had on the podcast. So I am so excited to interview you today. And Jake is also a very big part of the Kink community and the Furry community. So without further ado, I want to bring Jake on to talk about his story. Hi, Jake. How are you today?
I am good. I am vibing as one does in life. Just got to here, chilling, trying to make sense of the world, and very excited to be here, obviously, because when I saw your podcast, I was like, okay, yeah, these are my people. Absolutely going to swing by and say hello. I do know that I mentioned that I'm non-binary, and so for listeners out there, they may be wondering if I prefer he or they or she, and the answer is all of the above. I always push people towards a preference towards they, but he is fine too, and so is she, just because I'm so all over the place. And I know that other non-binary listeners may wonder, so just putting that out there so that no one yells at anybody that I am fine with all of the pronouns, because I am a little bit of everything.
Okay, and I appreciate you pointing that out to me because I didn't ask you that question before, and I think that is super important. Thank you for putting that out there for all of the listeners and for myself as well. Can you tell me a little bit about your story and your background and what brought you to this place right now?
Yeah, the long version would take us like 6 or 7 hours, but the clip notes version is
Yes.
basically I am a kinky person. I knew from a very young age that I was bisexual at the very least, and I grew up in a mostly open household. Grandma was definitely a dominatrix for sure. Mom probably also dabbled in kink. And so I grew up around it. When I turned 18, out into the world I went, like most 18-year-olds, trying to figure out what the heck I was and all that jazz. And very quickly learned that I wasn't male and I wasn't female. And that's when I learned about non binary. Became a DJ somewhere in the middle there, created an event where everyone could be who they wanted to be, which was our entirety, and then made kink education my one of my big focuses, and explaining to people that just because someone has a disability doesn't mean they can't do kink. Making people understand that kink is not necessarily what they see in 50 Shades of Grey, but there is a lot to it, that it's okay to talk about sex, that it's okay to talk about these things, and that the idea of everything is always has to be so proper, like that stigma, like it just needs to go. Like it's 2024. We all have body parts, like they just are there, and it's about time we stop pretending that they're not. And that's how we got here. I think that celebrating all of you is amazing.
I absolutely believe that as well. And body positivity is so important. And so I embrace that as well. And I embrace all of who you are. And you are so many different things. Even your names go on and on, right? You're Jake Didinsky, but you're also Pup Ultra, and you're also Ultra, and you're also DJ Jake Maxwell. Let's talk about the events that you put together. And I would love to know all about them.
Sure. So the event that I created with my brother by choice, because we believe in chosen family, is an event called Lights Out, Barks Out, or LOBO. It started originally as like a party that was geared more so for like pet players and kinky people, and very quickly turned into a party that was for pretty much everybody who felt like they needed a place to fit in. If you know anything about gay nightlife and circuit parties, that in the nicest way possible, circuit parties can sometimes be a lot of good looking dudes in a room. Are they the same guy? Who's to say? But the point is that it can be a little intimidating for people who have different body types or who are trans. So we set out to create a circuit party that would essentially be for the everybody else in that crowd that wanted to go to a party like that, but not necessarily be judged. As we quickly learned, our party became a safe space for people of all kink backgrounds, all sexualities, all genders. We have dancers of all body types, and it very much so became this melting pot of celebratory versions of being who you want to be and not being judged for it. The only real thing I think that we would never allow in is per se like a Nazi. But as long as you're not hurting somebody, I think we encourage people to be who they want to be in a safe space as long as they're doing it consensually, sanely. We give out when people come in to any of our events, they get a green, yellow, or red wristband. We use stoplight wristbands because that's generally accepted in the kink world. Green is open to touch. Orange we use now because we realize that some of our crowd is colorblind. So we got rid of yellow and replaced it with orange for
Okay.
accessibility reasons. That means ask, and red means do not touch. Regardless of color, you always need to ask and get verbal, enthusiastic consent, which can be revoked at any time. But the wristband gives people an idea where someone's mindset might be before they go, say, talk to somebody. And having a neurodiverse crowd, we just try to make it as easy as possible. So, yeah, that's a little bit about like the events that we throw in like a nutshell.
I love the wristband idea because it really helps others in the crowd to identify who is going to be open to talking to them. And I think that is such a genius idea. And thinking along the lines of people that won't be able to see a color is even more specifically focused on being very open to all abilities, every ability, whether someone has a disability or does not. And I think that is a beautiful thing. I praise you for doing that. And I love how you said that everybody must have enthusiastic consent, and not only that, but that it can be revoked at any time. And I often say on this podcast and to people that I'm talking to that at any point in a session that you're having sexually, you can say, "Excuse me, but I need to take a break." Or you can get up and say, "I need a bathroom break." Or you can get up and throw your clothes on and say, "I need to leave. Thank you very much," and move on. And so, really giving people the power to choose what is being done to them and what they are willing to do in a sexual situation is so important. And so, I really appreciate you having said that.
Yeah, I think sometimes it gets lost in the grand scheme of things that just because I gave you consent at the start of a scene doesn't mean that if you start doing things that I told you I wasn't okay with, that I then can't revoke that consent. I think, just to go off on a little side bit here, that sometimes we have younger members of our community who come in thinking that a DS or a Dom sub relationship is that you always do what the Dom says, no questions asked, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The most powerful person in the Dom sub relationship is always a submissive because they are choosing to give up control. Again, choosing to give up control to the Dom that they have trusted. And just as they chose to give up control to that Dom, they can just as easily revoke it. And so I think it's important that people understand that, especially the younger generation, that no, if someone's doing something to you that you aren't cool with, you have every right to call a red or whatever your safe word is. And if it's not being respected, you go and find somebody because we're pretty good at policing ourselves in the kink community. And yeah, but verbal enthusiastic consent or enthusiastic consent in whatever form it takes must be maintained from start to finish. And if you aren't sure if you've got it, you better double check and make sure because it's very near and dear to my heart. And that should be a no brainer. Don't touch somebody who doesn't want them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is not a given in regular relationships. You know what I mean? Because so many people are not having these conversations. And I think that the kink world really does it best because they bring to the table communication from the get go. And they're talking about what they like, what they dislike, all of that. And so it's so important. Do you want to go into what you do prior to an experience when you want to have a play session with somebody?
Yeah.
And
Course. So basically, I am of the mindset of I don't do hookup sessions, right? If I'm going to play with you, we're going to either be friends with benefits or we're going to be play partners or I'm going to see you again. If you're trying to do a one off with me, it's not going to happen. I keep my circle very tight and close to the vest. Doesn't mean that I won't allow people to play with me. It just means that one of my parameters for doing stuff with someone is that this has to be someone that I'm either going to see again or that I can then also go and say watch Super Tuesday results with, right? Like I need friends who can just as easily pin me to the bed and do naughty things to me and then also be there for me if I'm crying at 3 in the morning. That's what I look for. But whenever I do a scene for anyone, whether it's the first time, the fifth time, the 20th time, while there's some slightly different parameters around those, because if I've done stuff with somebody multiple times, they usually at that point have known what I've liked. There's still always a communication. But especially the first time, we go through, okay, if I'm taking on the sub role, here are the things that really work for me. Here are the things that don't work for me. Here is my list of soft limits. Here are my things of hard limits. And we use those words very specifically because a soft limit is something for me, and this means different things to different people, which is why that communication is so important. But for
yes,
me, a soft limit is I don't really love, for example, CBT, right? Like it is a soft limit for me. But if a Dom wants to do it to me in a scene and I trust them to stop it if it gets to a point, it's something I might be willing to do.
and
Whereas,
just
say,
describe what
go ahead.
CBT is, that we're
Oh, of
all on
course.
the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So CBT, sorry, I'm blushing a bit. CBT is cock and ball torture. So it can take on many different forms, whether it's slapping of the testicles or slapping of the dick, or occasionally, in some cases, putting weights on them or any number of various levels of infliction there. And for me, not my favorite thing. But I do have DOMs and friends of mine that it does it for them. And so I'm like, okay, up to a point, but like a hard limit for me, which is something that I will not do. There is no wiggle room. If you do this to me, we will A, never talk again, and B, this will be the end of the scene, is sounding. And for those who don't know what sounding is, that is inserting of a sound rod into the urethra of the penis. And it sounds more painful than it is. And for a lot of people, it's very like soothing. I have a history of kidney stones. I don't want it. Like I just hard limit. Once you have a catheter, that pretty much ruins the sounding kink forever. So like just low key being honest. If that's your jam, cool. Hard limit for me. And so that's like where we start to converse. And from there, once the baseline of I like this, I'm willing to do that, I won't do that is set, then there's usually a conversation of, okay, what do you envision this scene? Because we use the word scene to describe a play scene, but it's really just doing kink stuff with somebody. But we use the word scene because we do. Then it's all right. If I'm subbing for you, what do you envision? What is your game plan? You obviously don't have to tell me everything because I know that some DOMs like an element of surprise, but I need to know the general. Okay, you want to do X, Y, and Z. Cool. Do I need to prepare my butt for this or not? That's a pretty big question because otherwise, neither one of us are going to have a good time. And that's where the general idea of communication comes from. Are you bringing some random friend in that I've never met? I need to know about that. Otherwise, neither one of us is going to have a good time. And then, of course, there's the discussion of aftercare, which, side note, a lot of people confuse aftercare as being only for subs. It's not. Dom aftercare is an incredibly huge thing. Please, submissives out there, if you're hearing my voice, please remember that your DOMs need aftercare too, and that they may be taking on the role of tough and not saying it, but they need it just as much as you do. So then it's a discussion of what each person needs for aftercare, and then a scene. I know that's a
I
lot.
love considering that as well. And honestly, I think aftercare is so important. And I've talked about it multiple times on the podcast with different people. But you pointing out that not just the submissive needs aftercare, but the Dom needs aftercare too is so key because there's two people in the scene, right? And so both people need to be happy throughout, beginning, middle, and end, right? And ending
Yeah.
with the aftercare. I love that you point that out. And I think that's important for people to hear, whether you're in a quote unquote kink relationship or a regular one, right? Aftercare is important for any sexual experience, whether it's kink or not. And thinking about aftercare for everybody involved is really super important so that everybody can enjoy the finale of the experience together.
And I just think that it's like, for me, I bring that up because there is sometimes this confusion of one partner should be getting the aftercare than the other. No, both partners need aftercare, whether it's the top, the bottom, the dom, the sub, whatever it is. And it might be different things. Some subs or bottoms or whatever, like they really want to be cuddled afterwards. I don't. I don't like being touched, actually. I'm like very weird about cuddling sometimes. My version of aftercare is okay, give me 5 minutes and now let's talk about something that I really care about. Whereas sometimes some of the DOMs I play with, their aftercare is they would, as weird as it sounds, like they want their boots worship. Like there is some give and take there, right? But not every single person is the same. But that's where the idea, and I'm going to stress this in as big of a bold letter as I can, importance of talking to your partner comes in. Because at the end of the day, if I'm not talking to you and you're not talking to me and we're just winging it, nobody's going to be happy. And then we're both going to be like, that was a waste of 4 hours. Thanks. And I don't think anyone wants to be that way.
I love the 4 hours. That's a marathon of sex right there. But you know what? There's peaks and valleys. So I think that's
a lot of kink scenes can go that long. Like I've done 7 hour long kink scenes where I've been in like mummification or bondage for that long. And while my body has certainly hated me for it the next day, amazing time. Like I think low-key, that's one of the things people miss about kink is that there are a lot of therapeutic aspects to it as well, which is why I really wish more people would talk about it from a non-stigmatized standpoint.
Absolutely. And that is what this podcast is all about, destigmatizing conversations about sex. And not just regular, vanilla, ordinary sex, right? But every kind of sex that is imaginable.
Are you in menopause, perimenopause, or postmenopause? I have found the absolute best products called Parlor Games. I use the estriol and progesterone topical creams, and they have been game changers. Maybe you've listened to the show and want to be featured as a guest. Eve uses Podmatch to connect with new or potential guests. Reach out and begin the process today.
And so I want to jump into a community that you're part of in the kink community. It's like a subset of the kink community, the furry community. And I want you to tell us about that because you are the first furry that I'm ever having on this show. And I'm super excited to talk to you about that. Can you tell us what that's all about?
Yes. So I will preface this by saying that I tend to lean more on the pup side of things. And for the sanity of your podcast and furries not ripping you to shreds, I will preface this by saying that the furry community, while some of them will identify as being part of the kink community, some of them adversely will not. Yeah, they can be. They're furries. They're great people. I also am a furry, but it's a wide net. Think of it almost like anime, the anime fandom, how some of them will be really into certain things and some of them will disavow those exact same things. Same concept. But yes, I am a kinky furry. I'm also a puppy and a pet player. And that is where my bread and butter mostly lies because I was a pet player first, who became a furry second, albeit though looking back on my life, dated a lot of furries like through high school, just adjacently. I'm all over the map when you think about it. But yes, both of those communities are very close to my heart. The pup community, though, especially helped me figure out a lot about my life. It has given me a community where I felt like I didn't have one. It has allowed me to become a lot more confident in a lot of places. Just talking about the pup community here very briefly, I'm going to grab one of these props here. So you can see in my hand, this is one of my pup hoods. It has its moments. It's very cute. This is leather. It's made by Scrapyard. They're pretty cool. And then we've got my other hood, which I'm mostly more known for, which is also pink and blue. You're going to notice a trend here. And this one's more neoprene. Different materials, both have their aspects. When I first started wearing my pup hood, it wasn't, and it still isn't for the matter, always sexual. And I think that sometimes people assume that pup hoods and pet play is just always sexual, and it's sometimes it isn't. Like when I have my hoods on, because we don't call them masks, we call them hoods, I feel less anxiety. I feel like almost a shield goes up. A superhero, right? Like when Batman's wearing his outfit, he's not Bruce Wayne, he's Batman. When I'm wearing my hoods, I'm not Jake, I'm Ultra. And in places where I know I'm going to have high anxiety or not feel the most comfortable, putting on that hood allows me to feel more comfortable. And I only bring this up to say that when we start talking about places where something like that shouldn't be allowed to be worn in public, my response is to those people, I understand that you might think it's a sex object. And for some people, it is at times that, yes. But to other people, it can be a thing that allows me to go out in public and be more, I don't know, safe in my own body. And so I don't really know who the authority gets to be that gets to decide where I can and can't wear that. And I know that's a much larger topic for a much larger day, but just because we as society don't always understand something doesn't inherently mean that it's wrong. It means that we need to do a better job of educating ourselves on just exactly what it is before we make judgments. And that's how I feel on that.
You brought up a lot of really interesting points here. And I think you pointing out that the furry community is not necessarily in the kink community, and what you just said about feeling comfortable when wearing your hood and it giving you a confidence that you normally wouldn't have. It's almost like having a fidget or like something that makes you feel comfortable. And talking about the neurodivergent community, there are so many different things that could encompass. And so making that distinction is really important because in my mind, the furry community was part of the kink community, but it's not. You could be a kinky furry like you are, right? Or you could be a kinky pet player, but that doesn't mean that if you're a pet player or a furry, that you're kinky at all. It could just be.
Some people just like the aesthetic of the clothing. As weird as that sounds, like some people do just like the pup hood clothing aesthetic. And here's what I'll say is that most pet players would probably say that they are in the kink community, yes. I would say that the furries are kink adjacent. And what I mean by that is that there's certainly aspects of overlap, but ultimately, I wouldn't 100% say that they're full on kinky. And I also wouldn't 100% say that they full on aren't. I think that, like all communities, kink, anime, music, whatever it is, no one is ever 100% anything. And in speaking about destigmatizing things, that's how destigmatizing starts. It's by acknowledging that not every single person who does something fits the same bucket. And once you can acknowledge, that's when you start to break down the walls, essentially, of what we've been taught as preconceived notions of, for example, talking about sex is bad. Is it? Who decided that? Or is it that we just have always been told that it's not proper to talk about your body and the things that make you happy? And because of that, and society's view on what is normal, we have followed that because it wasn't too long ago, maybe like 50 years ago, when the idea of just even being gay was considered like something you couldn't even talk about. And society grows over time and only grows over time if we acknowledge that we have to stop painting in broad brushstrokes.
Absolutely. There are so many different nuances and there's so many different relationship types. And just thinking about the history of relationships, and if you look at the history of relationships in the US, just in terms of monogamy and marriage, 50, 60 years ago, 70% of the adult population was married in a heterosexual relationship.
Right.
And now that's in the low 40s. So, yes, we're seeing that historically relationship types are changing, but this is one type of, this is not a relationship. We're talking about different types of sexuality or ways of identifying yourself, right?
So, but there are pup relationships. There's alphas
Yeah.
and omegas, and there's a whole world out there. And then even within Dom sub, you've got Doms and subs, and that inherently, look, at the end of the day, living life is supposed to be this experience of learning on the go. And at the end of the day, if you can look back and say, I did a whole bunch of crazy things and I loved it, or you can look back and say, I was pretty vanilla and I loved it, that's fine. But nobody gets to say one is right and one is not. And ultimately, that's where destigmatization, that word that I cannot get out, comes from.
Yes, absolutely. Destigmatizing conversations about everything regarding sex, sexuality, relationships, how we identify, all of that is so key. So I really appreciate that you're so willing to come on here and talk about all of your experiences in your personal life and all of the things that you're doing to help others in your community to feel wanted and to feel like they belong.
Yeah, one of the things I learned very early on as I was starting to date in general, because I am bi slash pansexual, was that everything I had basically been taught as growing up as a closeted person who was posing as a straight boy most of their lives was like women like this and women like that, and very quickly found out that women have their own wants and needs and can voice those wants and needs as long as you talk to them and figure out what those wants and needs are. And when I went to college, I had a very preconceived notion of what my first college girlfriend would be like, and it could not have been any further from that at all. I wasn't comfortable topping. I just didn't my thing, and she didn't like bottoming, and so we dated for 2.5 3 years, and she just topped the entire relationship. And I love being pegged, didn't know even know that that was a word at the time, but let me tell you, men, if you are out there, try it. You might like it. It definitely spices up the bedroom at the very least, and at a minimum allows, and I say this as politely as possible, allows for men to sometimes feel what it's like to be on the receiving more submissive end of that, which could sometimes change your outlook in the bedroom in general for the better. So I always encourage couples who are heterosexual and straight to try it, because role reversals also help you understand things like orgasms and how we can both achieve things, and making sure that we're always working towards a common goal. I think in our pre-call, actually, we talked about it, and I was explaining that in general, you got to think about sex like an art form if you want to do it right. And also, in a lot of ways, communication. I think people sometimes don't realize that nonverbal communication happens. So when you are in the act of anything sexual, it is communication, and you are talking to each other, whether or not you're saying words or not. Your bodies are talking to each other. And if one body is out there dancing a ballet from Swan Lake, and the other body is out there trying to do like a paso doble or a foxtrot that's 128 BPMs faster, it's not going to go the way that you want it to go. But if you guys both get together and you perform Phantom of the Opera at its peak, okay, you're going to make magical moments that will literally just be euphoric for all parties. And I promise you, from the bottom of my soul, cannot make this more clear. Everybody is so much happier when everybody's needs are met, but you can only accomplish that if you talk to each other.
Absolutely. Communication is everything. And I love that you're talking about this and you're saying this and giving permission to everybody to open their mouths and say what they like. And the only way that you can say what you like is if you know it internally on your own. And I always like to encourage people to masturbate so that they can understand what really turns them on, right? Because if you don't know what turns you on, how could you possibly let your partner know when you don't even know yourself? So it's very important to know yourself first and then to be able to share that with others, with your partner, so that you can get your needs met, because sex is only as good as the communication that happens beforehand, I think.
And if I could just, and I don't know how much time we've got, but I just want to like speak directly to your audience if I can for a minute,
Go
specifically
for it.
the women, non-binary trans femmes first, and then to the men, just a little bit different conversation. So men in
Sure.
this part, feel free. If you're just a straight up dude, you can tune me out. But hi, ladies, how's it going? Real quick, if you ever find yourself in the bedroom and feel like your needs are not being met and you're questioning whether it is right or proper for you to stand up and say, hi, I'd really like to try this, the answer is absolutely insert own choice word yes. Oh my God, yes. You have just as much of a right to feel good in bed as your partner. And if your partner is refusing to even engage in that conversation, find a new one. Just straight up. I believe that women, and I say this having been raised by a single mother, so I know, have always been in this weird place where it's like having to do a balancing act of having to not be too forceful to offend their partners, but also not forceful enough. My answer to y'all is we got your back. And if God forbid the straight men can't handle it, come over here. The gays will let you peg us. We're cool. We got you. We love y'all. We think you're great. But real talk, in all seriousness, please stand up for yourself. Be willing to try things. The only way you're ever going to know if you like it is if you try it. And yeah, masturbation's totally cool. Male, female, I am pro masturbation. Go for it and use those toys and see what works. And now for my men on the other side. And ladies, everyone, you feel free to tune out if you want. Guys, hey, it's your boy, Ultra, real quick. We got to do a better job. I feel like we have taken for granted the idea of women just being comfortable telling us what they want, because in reality, I feel like sometimes we have this mindset that, oh, our girlfriends will always tell us exactly how they. No, guys, you have to be willing to extend an olive branch and start the conversation. If you don't, they may not, for fear of upsetting you. If you feel like something may be amiss, I guarantee you will win bonus points for this, by the way. If you initiate the conversation, hey, babe, what can I do in the bedroom to make sure you're having a better time? Or, hey, babe, what can I do to make sure that you're reaching climax? I promise you that their draw will drop first because they'll try to process what the heck is happening. And then you might very quickly learn that there are some shared interests that you didn't even know about. But that requires my men friends over here to be willing to understand that it's a two-way street. So, fellas, be willing to do it. Be willing to try things. You may not always love it, but try it. And who knows, you might find out you do like it. It's a work in progress, guys. Nothing is ever set in stone, and it doesn't have to be. You're only limited by your own willingness to try to make each other happy. And that's how much feel on both sides there.
I love that. Thank you so much for addressing both sides. And I think what you said earlier about sex being an art form and really trying to think outside the box and being very creative about what you want to try, because it doesn't always have to be the same. It can be so many different things, and it can be a wonderful way to connect with your partner and to grow together. And only through communication can that happen. So definitely appreciate you having that conversation. And because in heteronormative relationships, typically the woman tends to be more in the more of the submissive category, and that is not always the case, obviously. But generally, women tend to be more submissive and the man tends to be more dominant. And so the man extending that olive branch and really beginning that conversation with their partner. And sometimes it will take multiple times to get the person that you're with to really feel comfortable telling you. And sometimes it may not even be something that they can say verbally, but they might be able to write it down for you. And really, once you break that seal and you start that conversation, each conversation after that will be easier and easier. So, extending that olive branch, I think, is such a great way to look at it, because we do have to have these conversations in order for everybody's needs to be met.
Sure.
So, I definitely appreciate you saying that. And now I think we're going to go on to our last question, because I think this one is really fun. I want to know what tools you bring into the bedroom to make your experience amazing.
Yeah, so this is actually a two-part answer. So one is when I am topping or doming, and one is when I am bottoming because they require
Okay,
different things.
of course.
But the overall first tool that I bring, regardless of what role I am going to bring, is something called communication. You might have learned that we spent a lot of time hinting on that, and that's because I, as a dom or a sub, have one, or for that matter, as a partner in general, I really have one goal when it comes to the bedroom, and that is I want to make sure everybody leaves having a good time. And even if it's, and just for the record, having a good time doesn't always have to mean orgasm. And there are some people who are into orgasm denial, and that's a different conversation entirely. But if our goal here is to make sure we are all leaving with a good time, then yeah, we're going to talk about it. For me, if I'm a bottom, there's probably going to be rope or Hitachi wands or a gag because I'm a brat, low key. Definitely not, definitely well behaved. But and different various implements. And here's the kicker: because I will have communicated with whoever I'm playing with, they're probably bringing stuff too, and that is the idea of communication. And if I'm topping, I have two puppies of my own. They are very submissive because I can't do brats because I can't throw people around. So what they need is exactly what I have talked with them about. So either there will be like the fuck machine set up or lube or everything you can imagine, right? But at the end of the day, the most critical component that I bring to the bedroom is the ability to talk and make people feel safe and understanding of how our safe words are going to work in a scene before anything starts. And obviously, in closing, consistently checking in with the Dom or the sub regardless of what role I'm in, to let them know, yes, I'm good. No, I'm not. I need to slow down. That's why we use the green, yellow, red system. But in general, it's just the ability to communicate. That is the biggest tool you could bring into the bedroom.
I 100% agree. And starting that conversation before you get to the bedroom is really the best way to do it, because you want to talk about safety. You want to talk about consent. You want to talk about your safe words. You want to talk about all of these different things that are going to help to make the experience more enjoyable and for both partners or however many partners to feel safe and comfortable. And talking about enthusiastic consent and being able to, at any point in any part of the experience, feeling comfortable to say, let's slow down or let's stop or I need a break or whatever that may be for you, is so important for people to hear. Because just because you say yes half an hour ago, but something maybe not feels right now, you can say at that point, this doesn't feel right now. Can we switch it up, or can we do something different, or can we have a little break? And I think that
So
is so key.
one of the things I will say as we wrap up here is to always
Yes.
remember that the reason we use the stoplight system in the kink world, and that I wish more people would adopt the red, yellow, and green, is that even when someone goes nonverbal, which can happen if they're deep in subspace, and we can, I would love to be back on this podcast because I think there's a lot we can cover at some point. But
Yes.
even when a sub is deep, we have learned scientifically they can get easy to recognize words out like green, yellow, red. And if I'm tied up, the dom can ask me like, "Hey puppy, how are you doing?" And I can be like green or yellow, and yellow will signify to slow down. But if I say red, that's it. The scene is over, and then they are gonna break down and we are going to do aftercare. But here is the kicker, and people need to take this away too. Don't ever discuss a scene that you have done until 24 hours have happened. A lot of doms or for that matter tops or just in general always will ask 5-10 minutes after aftercare is done, okay, how do you think things went? Don't. The sub's going to lie to you and tell you exactly what they think they want to hear. Give them a chance to process and take your chance to process yourself. Come back 24 hours later and then debrief. always debrief, but never 5 minutes after, because everybody needs time to process, and that afterglow shouldn't be spent saying what went right, what went wrong. It should be spent with each other, and then 24 to 48 hours later reassessing how we could do things better.
I love that tip. And it's not something that I had ever heard before. And I often say that aftercare is a great time to have conversations about what went well, because
Well, and the reason I say it is,
yeah.
look, if I'm a sub, so if I'm subbing for, say, person X, and person X has just flogged me and we're done and we're doing aftercare, even though I may still not be fully in subspace, I do still probably see person X as a dom figure. So if they ask me immediately afterwards, how did I do? My inclination is going to be, okay, I don't want to upset this person, even if I felt like it was wrong. So I'm going to tell them great, which then means my ability to come back 24 hours later and say, actually, it wasn't, is gone. Now, if there's like a serious issue, we talk about it that night. But if it's like something that give it time to think on it, review, I always say, do aftercare, talk about things like how you doing, baby, like stuff like that. But don't get too deep into the weeds on how the scene went, because oftentimes subs will be in this wanting to please mode and will not necessarily give you the answer you need to become a better dom.
I love that. And I appreciate that very much. And again, it's about communication, right? Whether you're having that conversation right afterwards, which maybe is not the best time. Maybe you should be waiting a little bit, because it does take time to process and to think about everything that you experienced. I think that is a really great tip. So I want to make sure that all of my listeners can find you. Can you tell us where we can find you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much at DJ Jake Maxwell on everything, but that link tree that you can see very clearly displayed, I got this somewhere in this general area. I can poke, I promise. Go check it out. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Telegram. When you go to that link tree, if you have interest in following my AD Twitter, which is basically the adult stuff, message me for it. I'll give you the code. But in the most part, I'm pretty reachable and I love talking to people. So say hello. And if you're in the US, I'm probably DJing near you and I don't know, barking stuff. I'm a dog. I press buttons.
Where is your next show, by the way?
Ironically, I think I'm in DC this weekend, which is home base. And then I am in DC the following Saturday at the Crucible for one of our play parties, which will be a fun time. And then it's Columbus and Pittsburgh. So your dog gets around.
Watch out for Jake in a city near you, right?
Always.
So on that note, I'm going to say, Jake, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And until next time.
Looking for the best live streaming or podcast recording site? Look no further than StreamYard. Get $10 off your first purchase. For podcast hosting, Buzzsprout is the absolute best option out there. Get $20 off your first purchase. Feel free to call me on the OWL app. Use code EH576472 for $10 free to use on the best networking app around. Give me a call. See all links and info in the show notes.